Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Parent University. Parent University of Portland Public Schools is a forum for our parents to engage with the school district and to learn and be informed about trending topics that are of relevance to the education of our children. Tonight, our topic of conversation is question number 5 on the referendum. And we are going to hear from two perspectives, the pros and cons of question number 5, and what does it mean for Portland Public Schools and for Portland, the city of Portland. Our moderator for tonight's session is Aaron Townsend, our Assistant Superintendent for School Management. And I'll turn it over to Aaron.
Great. Thank you so much, Grace. And thank you all for joining us this evening to hear about and engage around this important issue. So again, as Grace said, I'm Aaron Townsend. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of School Management for Portland Public Schools. And as you heard Grace explain, tonight we're trying to provide some background information to inform Portland Public Schools stakeholders about question 5 on this November's ballot. As you probably know, the Charter Commission met over the course of last year to make important decisions about how to change the city's charter to better meet the current needs of the city. Over the course of the year, the 12 elected commissioners deliberated about a number of important issues. One of those issues was whether to change the process for determining how the school district's budget is developed. This was a significant enough issue leading up to the seating of the Charter Commission that several of the individuals elected to the commission had publicly stated that they felt that the current process was not working well for the city and that they would prioritize addressing those concerns if they were elected to the Charter Commission. The commission developed what is now known as Question 5, which we are here to learn more about today. The Charter Commission's report states, shall the municipality approve the charter modifications recommended by the Charter Commission relating to school board budget autonomy? Specifically, this charter modification changes the current school budget adoption process by transferring school budget adoption authority from the City Council to the school board. The proposal states that the City Council has discretion to conduct a public hearing on the proposed school budget and to provide a non-binding recommendation to the school board for its consideration, which the school board may or may not adopt in whole or in part. And, very importantly, the adopted school budget continues to be voted upon at the state-required budget validation referendum election that happens in June. To help us learn more about the rationale for and against this proposal, we are fortunate today to have with us two individuals who have deep understanding of how the process works today and what the implications are for this change. Emily Figdor. Emily is the current chair of the Portland Public Board of Public Education. She is on her second term on the board and has been involved in improving the Portland Public Schools as a parent, a PTO member and officer, and as the chair of the citizen initiative that brought us the $64 million bond that was approved by voters in 2017 to renovate Lyseth, Longfellow, Presumpscott, and Reiki elementary schools. She will be speaking for why you should vote to approve question 5. And we have with us tonight Michael Brennan. Representative Michael Brennan represents the 36th district in the Maine legislature and is currently the co-chair of the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee. He served one term as Portland's first citizen elected mayor and has been a strong advocate for the Portland Public Schools as a legislator and previously when he served as mayor. Mr. Brennan is a licensed clinical social worker and the parent of Portland Public Schools graduates. He will be speaking for why you should vote to not approve question 5. The way we're structuring this tonight is that each of them will have about 5 minutes to outline their perspective. Once they do, we will give them a couple of minutes to respond to anything in the other's presentation that they feel they might want to highlight, and then we will move to the audience questions. To ask a question, please use the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will be looking at the questions and grouping them, and I will ask them in turn. I know this is going to be a valuable and insightful conversation about this important topic. With that, let's get started. I'd like to invite Chair Figdor to open with her perspective on why you should vote yes for in question 5 on this November's ballot. Chair Figdor, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Assistant Superintendent Townsend. So again, I'm Emily Figdor, I'm chair of the school board, and I've been involved in the last 8 Portland school budgets, first as a parent in the community, then as a school board member on the finance committee, and now as chair. I'm a big proponent of question 5 because it will make our schools better while making local government more democratic, more efficient, more accessible, and more accountable. Question 5 empowers the voters and school board, rather than the city council, to determine the school budget each year. This is how it's done in 94% of Maine communities and all across the country. But right now, Portland is an outlier. It's a vestige of an antiquated way of thinking, that city councilors, largely white men, were the only people who could weigh budget decisions, and that the voters couldn't be trusted when it came to decisions about money. It served to concentrate power in the people already in power and to maintain the status quo. The result has contributed to the situation in our schools now. There are very significant gaps between economically disadvantaged students, who are mostly students of color, English language learners, and students with disabilities, and more advantaged students, who tend to be white. Most people don't realize it, but the city council doesn't oversee the schools. Imagine for a minute running something large and complex, and perhaps you do, a business, organization, household, team, or club. You're responsible for every aspect of it with one glitch. Someone else, someone not involved, each year determines what your budget will be. That someone doesn't know with any depth what you're up against or what will make your efforts successful. It's not their expertise, and they have no other role. They simply get to assign a dollar value to your work. That's the situation with the City Council and the Portland Public Schools. People sometimes refer to the school board as the school committee or school department. Both are wrong. The school board isn't an arm of the City Council, and nor is it subordinate to the council. The school board is solely responsible for our schools, and our authority comes from the state. That means that city councilors have no formal visibility into the school district's current operation, strengths, challenges, priorities, or programs, other than just through a handful of meetings annually on the school budget. But the council makes the most important decision on public education in our city each year, setting the school budget. This year, the city council told us to cut $1 million from the school budget, even though our children and schools needed those resources. There were a lot of politics involved. There always are. This system is broken, and that's where question 5 comes in. Question 5 empowers the school board and voters to pass the school budget. As I mentioned earlier, this model is already in place in most Maine communities and all across the country. It works in those communities, and it will work in Portland. Portland is a community that greatly values public education. Our local government should be structured to support our children and public schools. Question 5 fixes 4 other problems with our local government as well. First, our current system is inaccessible. The long process required to pass the school budget makes it difficult for voters to raise issues or concerns and be heard. Voters don't know which of the many meetings to attend on the school budget. The school board's finance committee meetings, the city's council's finance committee meetings, the joint meetings of the city and schools finance committees, full school board meetings, and/or full city council meetings. Second, since the school budget boomerangs back and forth between the school board and the city council, voters don't know who to hold accountable for the final result. Third, the current system is a highly inefficient use of scarce resources that takes school officials away from running the schools, as we collectively spend hundreds of hours each year getting the city council up to speed enough to be able to make a decision on the school budget. And fourth, the current system creates an adversarial relationship between the city council and the school board. Question 5 fixes all of these problems. The community will have more of a voice. The school board will be fully accountable for its budget. School officials can focus on running the schools, and the school board and city council can truly collaborate and make better decisions for the city as a whole. People sometimes ask about checks on the system, and I want to be clear that voters always have the final say on the school budget, which, as an aside, is not the case with the city budget. This is a powerful and nearly immediate check on the school board if we propose a budget that's out of line with what voters want. The bottom line is that question 5 is good for our kids, schools, and democracy, and it has broad support. The school board passed it unanimously last year. The Charter Commission passed it by a supermajority. Several city councilors are vocal advocates for the change, and it's widely supported in the community. So let's fix what's broken, and let's trust Portland voters. Our kids, our schools, and our city deserve no less. Please join me in voting yes on question 5.
Thank you so much, Chair Figdor. I'd like to turn it over now to Representative Brennan. You have about 5 minutes to state the case for no on question 5.
Well, Aaron, thank you very much. Thank you for having me here tonight. Glad to be here with Emily, Superintendent, and other people. And I really appreciate any parents and other people that have joined this discussion. And the fact of the matter is, this is a very, very important discussion, and it's one that will shape the future of the city. So I'm glad that people are paying attention, and I hope that we can clarify some of the issues that Emily just put on the table. Obviously, I think question 5 is highly problematic, and that it will create more division within the city and create more problems. And I'm not alone in my opinion. The attorney for the Charter Commission refused to sign off on this particular item because he didn't believe that it would be legal. The school committee then had to go out and hire Drummond Woodson, who is the attorney for the school board of education, and ask them to write an opinion that would be favorable. I've read both opinions. I've also spent 12 years on the education committee in Augusta, 4 years as co-chair. I've dealt with almost every legal issue of some consequence that has come before the legislature. And it's very clear to me in reading the Maine Constitution, and anybody can pick up the Maine Constitution, that it's very clear that the authority in the Constitution is vested in towns and municipalities to provide a public education. Emily did not point out the fact that the school board, or I'm sorry, the Board of Education is a creation of the state and of state statute. And so that's why it's inappropriate through this charter process to be giving authority or budgeting authority to the Board of Education, because that authority would have to come through state. I've never had a discussion with Emily. Emily's never come to me and said, you know, I think there are these type of things that could be changed to have better educational policy in Portland. But that's where the discussion should be, not through this charter process. The other thing is it's very misleading when Emily mentioned the fact that 90% of school districts across the state pass their budget this way. That's simply not true. There's not one other municipality in the state of Maine that has a charter that allows their Board of Education to set the budget. The other referendums that do pass educational budgets, those are again dictated by state statute. And those are very different educational organizations that have put together, distinctly different than municipalities. So Bangor, Lewiston, Biddeford, Saco, and Portland continue to have their city council involved in this decision-making process. The other thing, though, that I think is even more important is that this initiative is going to end up dividing the city when we should be bringing the city together and having more collaborative discussions about education, about public safety, about homelessness, about a wide range of issues and priorities within the city of Portland. To take the education budget, which is roughly about half the city's property tax, and silo that in a vacuum and have a discussion about that outside of these other issues within the city is simply wrong and bad public policy. And if I were to use an analogy, which is not perfect, but I am right now the House Chair of the Education Committee for the legislature in Augusta. Roughly 35 to 50%, now that we're 55% school funding, of general fund money goes to education in the state of Maine. If you took Emily's argument that she just made, you would then say the Education Committee, because we're the experts, we're the ones that understand the educational funding in the state, that we should be able to sit down as a committee, decide what funding priorities should be for education, half the state budget, that this one committee should be able to decide, ignore healthcare, ignore economic development, ignore public safety, and only have a discussion about what the needs are for education, and then send that out for public vote and ask the voters in the state of Maine, we just want you to vote right now just on the educational side and not take into consideration every other priority facing the state of Maine. Putting together as mayor and as a state legislator, I have reviewed city budgets, school committee budgets, and state budgets. What goes into those budgets is a lot of discussion by a lot of different people that have expertise across the board. Emily didn't point out the fact that right now, almost half or more of the people on the Portland City Council are former school committee members. And to indicate that they don't understand the school committee budget, because now they're on the city council, I just don't think most people would agree that that is possible. Certainly, I know that there are a number of people on the school committee now that aren't intimately familiar with the school funding process at the state level and the school funding formula and the impact that that has on the city of Portland. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't be part of the discussion and that they shouldn't be able to vote. What it means is that there are a lot of different voices and a lot of different people that go into that budgeting process. And rather than silo that discussion, we should figure out ways to be more collaborative. But essentially, my biggest disappointment with the Charter Commission is that they even put this item to Portland voters and on the ballot, because the legality of it is clearly in question. And if, in fact, this were to pass, we will be certainly faced with a number of suits and legal issues going forward. We don't need that in the city at this point. And if this were to pass, it's not going to do one thing to solve issues currently facing the school system around absenteeism, the number of ed techs we have, the number of teachers we have, and academic performance. So essentially what I would end up saying to people that are listening, question 5 does not address any of the problems that are facing the city of Portland in terms of educational issues. And I would really ask people to say, what is this question trying to solve? Because the school committee and, the Board of Education and the city has had adequate resources over the last years. Every budget has been approved. And again, Emily didn't point out the fact that fewer than 15% of Portland voters vote on the budget. So when she says there's overwhelming support, that's from a very, very small number of people in the city of Portland. So thank you. Yeah. And I'd be more than happy to answer any questions at this point.
Great. We do have a few questions. Before we go to questions, I'd like to give each of our officials here just a couple, 2 to 3 minutes to respond to 1 or 2 key issues that the other raised kind of directly, not just having had a chance to hear and listen to one another. So we'll kind of go back. Chair Figdor, if you'd like to take just a couple of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes all time, and to respond to any specific issue that was raised by Representative Brennan.
Sure, and thank you so much. So I'll start with the legal issues, and it's true that the Charter Commission's attorney did not sign this legal opinion, nor did he sign the legal opinion on clean elections. He had concerns with both issues, and on both issues, the Charter Commission sought out other legal opinions. Lawyers tend to disagree. We know that. Drummond Woodsum wrote the legal opinion on this question, and they are the preeminent experts on educational law in Maine. You know, point blank, like they're doing all the work, and they helped to draft this. So they did a lot of the legal research and helped to draft it, and we're on solid legal footing. So I'll just say, just because something hasn't been done before in Portland doesn't mean we shouldn't try it in order to improve the process and our educational outcomes. So that gets me to the idea that question 5 doesn't, that Representative Brennan said that question 5 he's asserting doesn't actually address our educational problems. And that couldn't be more far from the truth, because the current situation is that we have huge equity gaps, historic long-term equity gaps in our schools. And it's a result of how we funded education over many years. We can't keep letting kids fall through the cracks. We have to provide an education that meets every child's needs. And question 5 allows the school board to develop more student-centered budgets. It gets politics out of the process. It affords a greater voice for the school community and the broader Portland community to engage in the process. And so absolutely, it will make our schools better, as well as improving our democracy by making, as I said earlier, by making the system our local government much more democratic, more efficient, more accountable, and more accessible. And I'll just say, in terms of, the last point I'll speak to is this idea, because I hear it often, that there are city councilors now who served on the school board, and that should give them, that means that they understand the ins and outs of the school. There's certainly some truth to that, but our students and our schools are not static institutions. They are always evolving. And so, for instance, one of the first school budgets I was involved in, there was a former school board member who was then a city councilor who was lecturing Superintendent Batana that he shouldn't add a director of mental health services, because when he was on the school board, that position didn't exist, and so it wasn't needed. Clearly, he wasn't aware of the immense need to support our students in a much fuller way than we had in the past. So I see my time's up, and so I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you, Chair Figdor. And just before I give Representative Brennan just 2 to 3 minutes again to respond, want to invite people to post questions in the Q&A. We're going to start to get to those just after we hear from Representative Brennan. So Representative
Thanks,
Brennan.
Aaron. And again, I appreciate Emily's comments, and I appreciate her perspective on this. But I did have an opportunity to read Drummond Woodson's analysis, their legal analysis of this. And even anybody can read it. And if you read it, even they are not unequivocal in terms of saying this is legal. They leave open the question. There could be legal challenges to it and questions about it. So even Drummond Woodson, who drafted it for the school committee and in a favorable light, Board of Education indicated that potentially there could be problems. The second thing, and this is kind of a minor point, but just so people in public understand, Emily mentioned that the city council sets the budget, and that's not true. What the city council does is simply say, here's the maximum amount of money that will be spent on education in the city of Portland in a particular year. It does not have line item veto of the budget, and all of the items that go into the budget within that overall amount of money is determined by the Board of Education. So the Board of Education has maximum flexibility, leeway to put together the budget in ways that Emily was talking about, make it more student-centered. They can do all of that now, and the only intervention by the City Council is to set the overall amount. So I'm not sure what this question, how it's going to solve some of the issues facing the school committee. And again, last year, the City of Portland got a $6.2 million increase in school funding as a result of us going to 55%. And the school, despite the things that Emily just talked about in terms of student equity and things that they had to focus on, they put 3.5 million of that went into a reserve account. It did not go into teachers' classroom curriculum development or addressing student needs. It went into a reserve account to pay for debt service on the bond issues for the school. So I don't think, again, it's an issue of money or not having the resources. It's really asking the collective voices of the City Council, those people that are invested in education in the City of Portland, all of us, to continue to be involved and have voices when this budget is being developed and make sure that the needs of students, faculty, and parents are met.
Great. Thank you, Representative Brennan. We have a few questions that I'd like to tee up for others, and I think will give us a chance to kind of explore these issues further. So thank you, folks, for adding those in, and please continue to add questions if you have them. The first question, and I think maybe to Chair Figdor, is, there was, as Representative Brennan's raised, there have been questions about, the potential for challenges. So, what would happen if there was a lawsuit kind of challenging, this construct of, not having the City Council involved with an approval, with an approval role for the city, for the school budget?
Yeah, with this question, we don't face more legal exposure than we do on a whole host of issues that we come across every day in running our schools. So we would treat this very similarly. And the fact of the matter is that we have broad home rule authority, that there's strong deference given to charters, and it's very hard to see how a legal case could move forward. So, and if,
and what's, just in terms of the vetting of it, understand kind of you're naming the perspective that it would be hard to see a legal challenge move forward. But in the event that for some reason it did, right, what's the understanding of kind of what the impact may be or how we might have to respond as a district if the lawsuit did prevail?
It's a little speculative. We take it as, we face lawsuits. It's the reality of running a mid-sized urban school district. And so we'd move forward with addressing it as needed. But again, it would be, it's highly unlikely. But if it were to happen, we would move forward and address it, of course.
Aaron, if I could just add to that for a second. And this gets into kind of the weeds type thing. Emily talked about home rule, and home rule does apply to local municipalities. And again, boards of education are not created by those charters that municipalities have. So again, I think the attorney for the Charter Commission recognized that limitation, and that is why he was reluctant to sign off on this particular issue. I'm a little surprised that both Emily and the superintendent have been somewhat nonchalant about the fact that there could be a suit. And ironically, the suit could come from the City of Portland itself, because they would see this as a violation and infringement upon their charter authority by having the school board, the Board of Education, have this type of autonomy. So I think it's a very serious issue. I think it's a major issue, and I think it's the central issue in terms of discussion here about question 5.
I just want to say, I mean, that the idea that first of all, of course, it's within our home rule authority because it's part of the charter that we're seeking to amend with question 5. And the idea that the city of Portland would try to overrule the will of the voters by seeking to overturn question 5, that's where we get into division in our city. The division is about, is about elected officials disagreeing rather than actually addressing the core issues that we face, that we have huge needs in our school system, that that equity is a core issue that we need to address. So whether it's education or affordable housing or homelessness, these are issues that we have to actually solve as a city. And this question 5 is taking a big step forward in putting our school district on a stronger footing for the future.
Yeah.
Let me ask, we have another question here. This to you, Representative Brennan, just to begin. So do you think that if this question passed, would the ongoing discussions in Augusta on making the funding formula for public education more favorable to Portland be impacted? And if so, how?
Aaron, could you just repeat that again?
If question 5 is passed,
yep.
Just what would the impact be in the discussions in Augusta about potential changes to the funding formula, in terms of the favoring Portland?
Sure. I at this point, again, it would be speculation because we would be the first municipality and only community in the state of Maine that had moved in this direction and that had this authority given to the Board of Education. I think a lot of people in Augusta would look at it and be very concerned and think it's highly problematic. I can't speak to what other people would say and what impact it would have on the school funding formula. Now, for the most part, the school funding formula doesn't take into account the individual decision making within a community in terms of how they arrive at their budget. It's based on a number of other factors, but clearly, Portland being the largest school district in the state, whenever we do anything, we have more eyes on the city of Portland than is typically the case. I will say this past session, there were 3 changes that were made to the school funding formula that had a very positive effect on Portland. And I'm glad that we were able to do that because it provided more resources to the city. But at the same time, the superintendent and I had to have a couple discussions because he was not aware of one of the changes that we had made to the school funding formula and the positive impact that it would have had on the budget for Portland. And that's not a criticism of the superintendent. It just goes back to my point that there are a number of different people that are involved in this budgeting process, that there are a number of different pieces that go into funding schools within Portland, and we shouldn't be looking to silo or to have those discussions in vacuums. And that's what this proposal will do.
Could I just clarify one thing? Yeah. Mm-hmm. There are school districts, there are communities with charters just in our backyard that have charters and that their school boards approve, proposed budgets to voters that have no role for municipal officers. So just take Cumberland and North Yarmouth. Those are among the communities, the 94% of communities that don't have any role for municipal officers in passing their school budgets.
And Emily, I know you understand those are SADs, they're totally different in terms of their structure and the way that those school districts are put together, and they're guided by a state statute. And I feel fortunate. I'm glad to live in a community that does have a charter that guides decision-making process within the city. But you're really talking apples and oranges here, and we start comparing Cumberland School District and SADs to the city of Portland, Bangor, Lewiston. It's an apples and oranges comparison.
Chair Figueroa, finish your point. Yeah.
So, there are in fact 446 Maine communities that have school board budget autonomy. So it includes 315 cities and towns that are part of regional school districts or school administrative districts, and 131 town meeting towns. So it's school boards that are individual school districts and also have charters that are the exception. And so Portland is one of just 31 of those charter municipalities.
So Emily, you would agree, though.
You can just let me finish.
Yeah, sure.
What we're doing is aligning our school budget process to what is the norm across the state.
Again, it's not the norm. It's a totally different school structure and a totally different way that we provide education in the state. And you would agree, I think you would agree, that if this were to pass, Portland would be the first municipality and only municipality with a charter that would have this type of decision-making process in terms of setting its budget.
Yes, we would be the first individual school district with a charter that passed
Right.
that passed budget autonomy.
Right.
That does not mean that we should not do it, because the process right now does not work. It doesn't work for our students, and it doesn't work for our community. So the reason that we're here is because when the Charter Commission started its work, it was a core part of the issues that were coming up in terms of restructuring our city government to make it work better and to make it more responsive to voters.
Yeah, and it could be a discussion if there weren't significant and underlying legal problems with this issue. And unfortunately, I know from your perspective, it's unfortunate. And from my perspective, it's very problematic that these legal issues exist. And I think it's unfortunate that taxpayers in Portland are going to have to weigh off this discussion with looking at potential lawsuits down the road.
I know we've covered some of this ground already this evening, so I'd like to make sure we get to a couple other questions before we're closing for this evening. So maybe Emily, if you can initially respond to this next question, and then Representative Brennan, if you have anything to weigh in. So last year, the City Council reduced the budget by less than 1%. How would that less than 1% of 1 million have closed the achievement gap?
Emily would know better than myself, but I think that was a Finance Committee recommendation, but the entire council voted not to accept the Finance Committee recommendation. And I believe that the full request by the school board was in fact supported by the council and then sent out to referendum. Is that correct, Emily?
That is correct. The school board looked at what the impacts would be of cutting $1 million from the budget, and we couldn't. It was a very tight budget amid record inflation. It was a 4.1% increase, which ended up being less than what the city side of the budget increase was. And so we went back to the council and we said we can't do this and still stay on progress to meeting our equity goals. And so the council eventually relented. But that is not a situation that we can count on in the future, nor do we want to be in the position of not following a recommendation of another elected body that is, in fact, has the power to decide on the school budget.
Aaron, I'm sure you know this, but I just would point out from the person who asked the question that over the last 2 years, the city of Portland received at least $35 million of federal money directly to the Board of Education. That was above and beyond state funding and local municipal funding. So clearly COVID-19 affected learning. We're starting to see a little bit more how it has affected learning, not only in Portland, but across the state. But there was a considerable infusion of federal money directly into the city of Portland to address a number of these issues.
Yeah, and there, ongoing, there are, various federal, funding streams that,
Right.
The Title I and such that are also ongoing sources of federal funding around that. Let me ask another question just to make sure we get, appreciate our attendees for being with us for this discussion this evening. So, and maybe Emily, you can lead on the response here, but, one question from an attendee was, that as they understand it, studies have shown that school fiscal autonomy does not produce improved student outcomes. Rather, it is, the management of the money that they do have that, is, has a greater impact. So just your reflections on that, in terms of the argument of having, the school board have more autonomy over the budget and how that will lead to closing the achievement gap.
Yeah, I haven't seen that research, and it's probably, it's probably looking at apples to oranges, because the type of districts that have fiscal autonomy are going to have different needs than the ones that don't. So, but I'll just say more broadly, the research, there's a mountain of research that shows that investing in public schools matters, that it makes the resources make a great deal of difference in terms of student outcomes. Right. So that body of research is very clear. And we know that resources will continue to be critical as we try to address all the challenges we face in Portland Public Schools.
Yeah, I would agree with Emily. I'm not familiar with that research. But again, Emily and I think I would agree on this. I mean, the research is also very clear. The socioeconomic issues drive a lot in terms of student achievement. And one of the ways that we try to address that in the city of Portland is teachers. Teachers do make a difference. The quality of teachers make a difference. Staff in the classroom does make a difference. And we've been fortunate in the city of Portland. In the last 3 years, we've had 2 of the Maine Teacher of the Years selected, which is very unusual and says a lot about the city of Portland. And the only reason I know that, my aunt was the Maine Teacher of the Year when she was a teacher in Portland. And I think it's a great tribute to the city of Portland teachers and staff, to you, Aaron, to Emily and Javier and everybody else, that we've had 2 of the 3 Maine Teacher of the Year in the city of Portland, and that speaks well for students to have access to that quality teacher.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Representative Brennan, for lifting that up. Shout out to our amazing staff and teachers. Mr. Bernstein joins a long, distinguished list of recognized Portland educators, so appreciate that. I think we have time for another question here before we close out. But so a question. So if question 5 passes, how do city officials and the school board work together about what the whole city budget is, including schools, but also city services, so that there is attention to the total amount of property tax increases necessary to cover the budget?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And there is a provision in question 2 that would create a joint budget committee consisting of 4 city councilors and 4 school board members to look at overall priorities, both for the city and the school district each year, as well as constraints, and to make recommendations to the city council and to the school board. I am so optimistic about that process, because right now we don't have that ability to collaborate and to have to think big picture about the city overall. Right now, it's just the city council. It's a one-way conversation. The city council informing the school board about what its budget should be. We don't get to have a two-way conversation about the overall priorities for our city, considering both city services and the school district. That makes me optimistic. If that provision doesn't pass, I still, as a leader on the school board, would seek to have a similar process in place. Currently, the chair of the city's finance committee is Mark Dion, Councillor Dion, who I've worked well with over many years, and I would foresee sitting down with Councillor Dion and figuring out a series of conversations where a series of meetings where we can have those broad conversations about before the budget cycle begins about the priorities. That makes me optimistic. I think we'll do a much better job as a city because we can think about not just one side of the budget, but both sides of the budget and do it in a collaborative way. That collaboration does not exist right now.
I think this is an area that Emily and I would agree upon. And I appreciate the question from whoever posed it. I actually met with the Charter Commission 3 different times, the Education Committee and the Governor's Committee, and I recommended something that's similar in question 2 of having a joint committee to facilitate these types of conversations. What Emily didn't mention was that the part in Section 2 is totally voluntary. They can only make recommendations. They have no authority to decide how much the budget should be, and so it's just advisory. But what Emily pointed out, and I'll be the first one to sit down with her, if question 5, which I hope doesn't pass, it would be an opportunity for us to sit down, create this type of process, and have that type of dialogue. And I hope Emily would appoint me to the committee to be able to be part of the discussion. But the other thing I just want to clarify, because I think this is important. Again, when I was mayor of Portland, I used to meet with the superintendent every month, if not more often. I met with the chair of the school committee, the board. I'm going to get this right, Emily, by the end of the night, the Board of Education. That I met with her almost every month or every other month. There are ongoing discussions between the finance committee and the city of Portland and the school department at this point and the school finance committee. Emily has indicated that somehow there's no communication, no discussion at this point. I don't think that's an accurate portrayal of what happens. It certainly was not my experience when I was mayor.
Just to clarify, it's a one-way conversation. It's the city council informing the school board about what our budget should be. It's not a two-way conversation looking at the overall needs in the city and priorities and being able to make that global, having a more global conversation. That's what I seek. Okay. As a school board member.
And that could easily be done. That could easily be done without this charter change and creating all the legal issues that would ensue.
I've tried to pursue that, and I just don't see it happening because people are busy. The city councilors are busy, and so making that process out of whole cloth, I unfortunately do not see.
Well, I'll tell you what. If question 5 doesn't pass, I will call you on November 9th, and we will find a way. A path forward to have this type of collaborative discussion.
I appreciate every opportunity to work with you, Representative Brennan. I think it would be even, in that situation, it would be a different conversation because the two bodies wouldn't be on equal ground. But in the case that it doesn't pass, I would welcome the opportunity to work with you. And in this case,
so now we officially have it on record.
We are recording. Wonderful. Well, I want to thank both of our panelists. This was extremely insightful and helpful. Thank you all attendees. We had a nice group of about 20 or so folks join us this evening. I hope everyone has a better understanding of the issues and feels better equipped to make an informed decision on November 8th or earlier, as polls are open now for absentee voting. And again, I want to thank Portland Board of Public Education Chair, Ms. Figdor, and State Representative Mr. Brennan for sharing their thoughts and insights. Thank you to Grace Valenzuela and her parent university team for continuing to bring us opportunities to better understand the issues and make informed decisions, whether as parents, educators, or taxpayers. Good night, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.